Hey, Shawna Karrasch here, and one of the things I wanted to talk about is targeting. And and I think it's the emotions behind the targeting that I think are so important and why we do it. There's a lot of times people don't understand about targeting and what it means and how to do it and why we would do it. You know, they want to work on something else. What does targeting have to do with it? But I think there's been some really good examples that I've discovered over the years that have been very pertinent to kind of recognize the underlying issues or underlying benefits. Maybe that's a better term of targeting. So one of the first things that I first noticed was when I was with John and Beezy and I first started working there. It was the very first week that I'd gone there. So John heard about, we talked over dinner about the type of training we're doing with the marine mammals. And he went home, and so he was very intent listening, and I sent him home with a clicker that I had from SeaWorld from a long time ago, because we hadn't used clickers for a long time at SeaWorld. We didn't call it clicker training. But I had just a pile of them in a drawer that we had used at one point, I think with the otters or something. So I gave him a clicker, and he went home with the principles. And that very first day, he called and said, I not only got, because he had a horse who's terrified of a riding stick. You couldn't touch him with a riding stick. Somebody else couldn't touch him with you couldn't have it around him. It just couldn't be anywhere near him, on the ground, under saddle, whatever. And so John went home and he called the next day and said, I not only got this horse to touch the riding stick, I can't get him to stop. So if I could turn this big of a no into this big of a yes, this fast, there's a place for this in Grand Prix show jumping. So please come here. Let's start a business. Let's do this. Let's work together. So that first week I went was really, now keep in mind, I'd never done any bridge conditioning or target training with a horse at this point. In fact, I was told by a lot of people, even professional horsemen, and women, you could not train horses like this. They don't think like this. They weren't smart enough to do this. That's just not how it worked. And kind of in fairness, I thought, well, I've never worked with horses, so I cannot assume that this is how it will go. But I have seen with my own eyes, in person, seen target trained hyenas, meerkats, hippos, rhinos, lions, tigers, bears, llamas, giraffes, elephants, sharks, goldfish. So I kind of thought, I think you can do it with horses, but I couldn't say for sure because I hadn't, so I thought maybe there's something in there I don't quite understand. So John called me that first day and he did say, no, this is amazing. And if I could turn that first day, he said, I not only got this horse to touch the riding stick, I can't get him to stop. And that's where he said, if I can turn this big of a no into this big of a yes, this fast, there's a place for this in Grand Prix show jumping. So please come here and let's start a business and let's do this. So that first week was not really about bridge conditioning and target training the horses, which it was the very first time I had done that. But it was really about how us humans kind of worked out. Did I want to move to upstate New York from San Diego and, all those kind of things. So all I did was 3 5-minute sessions. We had picked, I think it was like 8 horses maybe. I did 3 5-minute sessions a day with the bridge conditioning, and I did use a clicker. And so they got 3 5-minute sessions a day with clicker, the bridge conditioning with the relaxation and the manners being built into that. And actually the manners I kind of discovered in that period because I was like, I'm not used to them mugging me. That's not what happens with a dolphin. Anyway, so then the next part was 3 5-minute sessions a day of target training. So I saw them for 6 days, 3 5-minute sessions a day. I never took them out of their stall or left their stalls with them. They went out and get turned out and, done all sorts of things go on in their day. But I wasn't part of any of that. I would watch, I'd watch riding. I'd watch what they're doing. But I wasn't actively a part of that, and BZ was not actively a part of what I did. While everybody would watch the horses in the learning process, they weren't really part of the training session. They watched from outside the stalls or paddocks. And so then at the end of the week, BZ reported, and she's a person who doesn't talk a lot, so she doesn't just bandy about, extra things to say. She just talks about what's essential, so she's very honest and sincere in that way. And so she said, those horses you're working are remarkably better in the arena. Yet at this point, the training had never overlapped. So it would, but at this point it hadn't. Yet it improved each of them and their attitude in the arena. So it told me something about that when we started incorporating the training period, it improved their quality of life, it improved their disposition. And I'm going to have to kind of, while there's a lot of horses I think are quite unhappy in their showing situation, Beezy is a very non-confrontational rider. That's her personality with people, with riding. That's how she is. She picks horses who are already jumping, who like jumping, and are good at jumping. They might be young, but she'll bring them the rest of the way. But she wants to be sure there's a certain attitude there that she's working with what they already have. So we kind of had a best situation there. She wasn't trying to just get horses and make them do something they weren't happy doing, because that's not how she is. Now, that happens a lot in the show world, so I'm going to be honest there, but that wasn't what we were seeing here. So to see those horses who were pretty much balanced horses who enjoy their time jumping, they were still improving in their performance, in their outlook, in their demeanor. Everything they did started being a little bit easier and softer. So we're already working with horses that are in a good place. So it only changed from there as I started working with horses that weren't really in a good place. And then you just saw huge differences and personality changes. And keep in mind, with the marine mammals, everybody had positive reinforcement all throughout their life. They had a lot of consistency. Even if they, were beached and they went through the rescue process and all that, it was still, as they got into training, there was a lot of consistency. You have a whole group of people doing it that are very well trained and doing it, very aware of the behavior, very aware of the academic side as well as the practical application, decades of experience around them. So they had a very consistent and good upbringing, from there. Their training went along a certain trajectory. It was very even. Now, you have horses, or you had animals, that were frightened and fearful. The sea lion, they could be skittish and worried. So you had your different personalities, but it was a certain trajectory that went along. And emotions was always a part of it, because they got all their food each and every day. They got all their social interactions each and every day. So that they had to, it was always their choice if they wanted to work or not. And so the only way to create that was to make it be a happy, fun thing where they enjoyed it, they liked it, they were relaxed about it, they weren't manic about it, and yet they wanted to do it to a high level, a high criteria. So the emotions was always a consideration in that prospect. So when I first started working with horses, all of a sudden you started seeing things changing. So horses that weren't used to positive reinforcement were now having positive reinforcement in their life. And so it was really then that I kind of discovered the depths of the training. And in the very beginning, as I started working, I could just say anecdotally, I'd say a lot of things will get better. I don't know why, but they just will. And now with neurobiologists, we're starting to understand what's going on, what parts of the brain are used, when does dopamine spike, what's happening. We can now physically monitor these things that we couldn't in the beginning. So that's been a big benefit. But I would just, anecdotally, you just go, this is what happens. I don't know what to say. It just will. It just does. But so back to the targeting. So Husker Du with that one situation, that one horse in that situation, he was worried and it brought him from nervous to relax. But I've also seen it. There was a time when my horses it was the end of the day, so they were just eating hay in their stalls. They'd been out all day doing what they do and running around playing in sessions and all that stuff. And they're just back and they were eating their hay. So I was cleaning tack and some people were working in the hayloft. And something happened that was so loud in the hayloft that I jumped. And both of the horses that I could see, it was Mint and George, were my original two from John and Beezy, they both flew to their stationary targets. And I mean, so they have stationary targets in their stall. When I come up to the door, or a paddock or a trailer, I can just say target and they go hold on their targets, and you can open the door, close the door, enter the stall or paddock, exit, put food in their bucket, put blankets on, pick up their feet, and they just kind of continue to hold, and they just do their thing. So I do it all the time. It's kind of a way to start the session. It says, are you ready? Do you want to do this? Are you ready to go out and start learning? And it also tells me a lot about their mood for that day. So they're kind of slow. Then you're like, okay, something's going on, or whatever it is. So I did it all the time. And when they got startled, both of them instantaneously, without looking at each other, it was their reflex response resulted in them both going flying to their stationary targets when they got startled. So that was, another time I started to go, what was that about? I don't know. I'm pleased, but I'm also kind of curious because what was that? But it showed, and this was 18 years ago, something 19, I don't know. It was a long time ago. So that was kind of an early thing where you started to recognize how powerful that the stationary targeting was. And I think in that situation, it was the physical stationary target became something they saw, and they immediately kind of went to that place because it was a safe physical place to go. But we have to keep in mind that it's a trained behavior, that behaviors can become that strong as well. And there was a situation where, or like I will use these kind of behaviors when I'm like teaching a spooky horse to ride. I will teach them that bend and soft and relaxed is a really good behavior. So I work it in the best case scenario. I give them lots of food for this choice to do these things. And pretty soon you can tell, like you'll even just be warming up and they start kind of bending and soft. So you tell they're like thinking, ooh, this is good positive reinforcement place. And then you can use that quite a bit when you get to a place where you start to see them kind of worrying about something off in the distance. You say, hey, can you bend? A lot of times they go, yeah, I can bend. And they go back to that safe place. So they kind of make a choice. Let this go. And they do. And then they'll often, sometimes it doesn't quite work as well. But a lot of times they let go. We go, okay. And you can feel them just relax and get back to working and letting go of whatever it was. So in that situation, it's not so far from the target. Now, it was probably the cue that took them to that place versus them just automatically thinking it by themselves. But it was a physical stimulus that they said, I'm going to choose this. This is what I'm going to do. So the training all over the place. The classic conditioning never stops. We think about it with the bridge conditioning, but it happens with the target. It happens with the side bucket. It happens with the trained behaviors when the dopamine spikes when they get the cue because they know it's an opportunity for positive reinforcement. So all of it starts to change as it builds a strong reinforcement history. And that also includes us. And I think that's a really important thing to keep aware of because if we're becoming a conditioned reinforcer, we may be reinforcing a lot of things we do not realize. So I think it's an important point to keep in mind as you begin training your horse and interacting with them. And there was one other situation I wanted to talk about, and that was with the stationary targeting and the emotions. So as I tell the story about Mitt and George going to their targets, flying to their targets when they got startled, I started having clients wanting to use this in a way to build where they could use it for kind of harder situations, where they could build it up as much as they could. But like with driving in a trailer, if the stationary target is there, they could then help them to go to the target, and that could help them. And there's one situation where a woman, and she reported this later, so I didn't know. She came to another clinic, and she said she had heard me at another clinic or in my book or something talking about the Mitt and George flying to their targets. So she decided she had a horse who was in a hurricane. So when thunderstorms came around, he was totally frightened and totally fearful. So what she started doing is when a thunderstorm, and she lived in South Carolina on the coast, lots of thunderstorms. So when thunderstorms would come, she had a stationary target in his stall that she taught him in the best case scenario, so it was a happy, good thing he already liked. When the pressure started changing and he started getting worried, she would come in, or when she could tell it was about to change, she would come in and start doing the targeting and reinforcing him and targeting and doing some training with him until he was settled and just eating his food, and she would leave him with his hay and he'd be back to normal and he was in a good place and he could cope with it. So she did this for a while until pretty soon she'd come out and he wasn't worried anymore about the thunderstorm. So she'd built up a good positive reinforcement history with thunderstorms and pressure changes and all that comes with it, so that he was settled through those thunderstorms, and he started to learn it's a good thing, not a bad thing. And then I guess some time later, something happened, and a transformer blew. So it's another storm coming, a tropical storm or something, and a transformer blew, and it was so loud. I mean, it's like a huge explosion. And so she, was running around kind of trying to deal with all the things. And she went to the barn. All the horses were reeling that were in stalls or in and out of their stalls were reeling, except this one. He was just eating his grass. So I'm sure he's startled at the moment. I imagine if we watched, he probably went to a stationary target and then just settled and got back to business. So you can use the emotions that we have that are part of the training are very, very, very important. And I think it is something not to be underestimated. I think for people that are newer to the training, they don't always recognize the depth of the training and how much it is a psychological change. It is emotional change. It changes choices. It changes a lot of other things besides the target behavior we're working with. It's not really just a means to an end. In fact, I think you're doing your horse a disservice if you look at it as a means to an end, to get from this behavior to that behavior. Instead, we want to look at the psychological part, the emotional part. We want to create a well-balanced horse who's in a good place. And I think with that, when we start to do that, start to recognizing the signs of a happy horse or a not so happy horse, or the subtlest signs of distress or unhappy or whatever it might be, I think we then do become more empathetic. And we, instead of just trying to manufacture things or put them into our agenda, we start to think, you know what, I don't know that this is the happiest place for you. I have a friend who was she's a world champion driver, and she won the world champions with her little horse Kabam, who I have worked with too. I mean, she came and brought, I mean, that's when she learned about positive reinforcement. She wanted to teach him tricks. And then she realized it was for so much more. But as she went along, they're very big on cross-training their horses. And as she would cross-train the horses, she started discovering, you know what? He really seems, and he was a happy horse. I mean, he was not an unhappy horse in what he did, but she could see that he was happier doing the ridden dressage than he was at other things. I mean, and he was happy otherwise. It wasn't like he was unhappy, but she saw he had more joy in that. And so she sold him to a little kid as a dressage horse for some little girl who loved him and was going to continue to give him a good, happy, fulfilling life. It was her pony, you know, and that, to me, is really how it should be. And a lot of people, from what I understand, came to her and said, you could have won the next, you know, world champion with him. He was great. He was happy. He liked it. He's young. And she said, yeah, but he was happier doing the ridden dressage, so I'll just get another one. You know, and I love that she didn't think of her own selfish issues, because she could have really, you know, brought herself to a higher recognition by continuing to do that, and she didn't do that. What came first was his happiness and where he was best suited. And I think that that is a really valuable lesson for everybody, because I think that we should really continue to put their happiness above all else. We can find horses and create horses who enjoy their jobs and love their jobs if we take the time and do it right and pay attention to them. And then we also need to be ready, though, to say, you know, this isn't for you. Maybe this is a better thing for you, or maybe nothing's a better thing for you. You know, maybe you like being turned out. But a lot of times when you start with a positive reinforcement, they're quite eager to want to do stuff. You know, they're happy as clams learning new stuff and doing new stuff. And so I think if we are empathetic and watching the horses, we'll make new decisions and valuable decisions. And one final thing I wanted to talk about with the targeting, the target should never be a crutch. Stationary target, yes, the stationary target will always be a part of stationary targeting, and there's a value to that, because they can see the target, they can touch the target, is a physical thing that can help draw them in those nervous situations. But a lot of times when we're using handheld target, it is to create behavior. It should never be something, it is something that we should start fading right away. So when the horse looks at the target, they should look at it as a clue. So following it's okay, and we should be bridging the action that the target creates as opposed to touching the target. So in the beginning, we have to teach touching the target, so they want to pursue it, they like it, they get the idea behind it. And then I still maintain that throughout here and there, but we should really remind ourselves that it shouldn't be a crutch. It should serve as a clue for the horses, and we begin to fade it. So it's a way to create something worth bridging. So I think that's another misnomer that people have about the targeting. They think that they can't fade it, or they get too reliant on it. And I think it is really just to create something worth bridging, to create activity or lack of activity, depending on what we're doing. Anyway, that's my little rant about targeting and the emotions that are a part of targeting and a part of the training in general. So anyway, I hope this helps some of you guys out there who are starting on your way with the positive reinforcement, or perhaps just considering doing positive reinforcement, or not sure if it's right for you or not. And I can tell you beyond a shadow of doubt, it is right for you. Anyway, so that's it. I'm Shawna Karrasch. If you want to learn more, you can go to on-target-training.com. Also, we have with Connection Training. Connection Training is an online study courses that I've created with Hannah Dawson as well as Rachel Bedingfield. And so it is a way that you can learn and have support, have a community, have a safe place to learn where you can really learn online as well. And we have had huge successes from people all around the world that have gotten on and taken it to the next level. And we created it because there are a lot of pockets of places that people didn't have somebody that could come and help them. So we needed to make the next best thing we could. But I got to tell you, positive reinforcement is taking off. The reception and the change that I've seen in the 24 years I've been doing it has been really amazing, and it's exponentially growing and changing. So it's exciting to see so many people discovering it and discovering the value. And just a little reminder, it's all based in science. We didn't make it up. We're just out here to help you to implement it. So there's lots of great resources out there, and you can go to my YouTube page where lots of Shawna Karrasch things to look at for free, as well as, like I said, there's some websites you can go to. All right, that's it. I hope that helps some of you. Until next time, bye-bye.